Hello, welcome to another Making STEM Connections webinar. Excited to see you again today to talk to you about the outcomes and challenges of maker education. And I want to begin, as I always do, with an example of a maker's activity that you can do with your Making STEM Connections kit. So one that I wanted to start off with works really well this time of year when it gets cold outside, and that is making reusable hand warmers. So this is something you can create using the sewing machine, the thread that comes in the sewing kit, and hand sewing needles. Your own, you would need to provide some of the fabric. In this case, I used flannel and also rice, just regular rice that you can use for cooking. So let me show you how I made these. This is an example of the hand warmers. And they are basically just squares, kind of like bean bags, that I sewed using the sewing machine. Then I filled them with rice, and then I hand stitched them closed. So let me show you how I did that. You can start with pieces of fabric. So 2 pieces of fabric that you're going to cut into a square shape. And you're going to put the right sides, meaning the pattern side, in together, so that the wrong sides are facing out. And then you can sew around 3 of the sides, leaving an opening on the 4th side. This is where we're going to pour in the rice. So after you make these stitches, you're going to turn this inside out. It's very similar to making a pillow. So then you turn it inside out, and you push all those corners through, and you create this little pocket. This is the same way you would make a beanbag, for example. And you would put the rice inside, and I recommend not filling it more than 3/4 full. If you fill the whole pocket all the way full with the rice, it's very difficult to sew this closed, the opening closed, but it also makes it not as flexible for holding in your hand. So you're going to fill it about 3/4 full with the rice, and then you can tuck this part inside of itself, and then use the needles, the hand stitching needles, and some thread to just sew that closed. And I can show you where I did that here. So you can see this stitching right here. That is where I hand stitched that opening closed. And remember not to fill the rice all the way, because it still allows the beanbag or the hand warmer to be flexible for gripping and holding on to. Once you have these filled, what you can do then is put them into the microwave. So if you set these into the microwave, you can have them or put them in the microwave for 30-second increments until they are the temperature that you would like to hold on to in your hand. So maybe before you go and do recess duty, or you go for pickup lane or drop off or something like that outside, you can put them into the microwave for 30-second increments to get it to the temperature that you would like, and then you can hold it in your hands and keep it warm. They will obviously eventually cool off, but then when you want to use them again, you just put them back into the microwave to heat them up. And you can reuse them over and over and over again. These just happen to be this perfect size to fit into your hands to keep your hands warm. You could also make larger ones for putting around your neck, or maybe having at your feet, or something like that. The rice that you use is just regular rice that you cook with. I happen to put in my rice cloves. So there are whole cloves that are in here, and it kind of gives the rice a scent. And then also those cloves can go inside of the bag, inside of the hand warmer as well, so that once this rice is heated up, it'll have that scent of cloves. You can also spray different fragrances in here. You could put essential oils in here if you would like, so that when the rice is heated up, it has that fragrance. So these are really great and easy to make, and they make wonderful gifts. So if you were creating something around the holiday time that you wanted to give to people, this could be a great gift for children to give to their teachers or their parents, grandparents, their friends. And again, they can be used over and over and over again by just heating them up in the microwave. Some other things that I brought to share with you are some resource materials or some books that you could use to go along with your makers activities. The first one is called Making and Tinkering with STEM. This is a publication that's been put out by NACE, which is the National Association of the Education of Young Children. And it is a wonderful resource for maker activities for children's ages 3 to 8. And what I really enjoy about this book is the layout of it and how they explain the materials that you need and the directions, but even more so how they align these different activities with books. So for example, the section that's on repurposing right here, okay, this repurpose it section is based on the book called The Most Magnificent Thing, which if you received the K3 kit is one of the student books that you got. And so all of the activities are about repurposing items, materials, and really go along with the struggle of the girl in The Most Magnificent Thing. So you can order this book through Amazon. They also sell it on the NACE website. And if you receive the Pint-Sized Science Award through the Governor's STEM Council, this book came as a part of one of the module titles for that as well. Another book that I brought that is in our Pint-Sized Science kit, but I think works really well for making STEM connections, is called Going Places. And Going Places is a story of two children, a boy and a girl, that receive a kit for a go-kart. And they are given the instructions of how to create the go-kart, and everybody in their class makes the same go-kart using the same kit, except for these two young people. They decide to make something different with it and not follow the instructions, and to be innovative and creative with their thought process, to make something that allows them to go places. So this is a really great book to tell that story about innovation and creation, which leads us into our webinar theme for today. So we're going to talk about challenges and outcomes of maker education, and I'm going to ask you to participate in writing some things down, thinking about things, and challenging your thought process. So today's webinar is really going to be focused on that idea of innovation and how do we overcome those challenges that are involved with making in a learning environment. First, I want to show you a couple of other ideas of some creative and innovative ways to use materials that are in your kit. The first one that you see here is an art bot. There are directions in the curriculum framework for how to make an art bot, but you see the DC motor is attached on top of this plastic cup. There is a battery that is inside of the plastic cup to power the motor. And attached to the motor, you see a cork and a craft stick. And the intention of that is to put the motor out of balance so that when the power is connected and the motor begins to spin, it causes the cup and the markers that are attached to wobble and move, therefore creating the art that you see on the paper. So this is known as an art bot, and these are things that you can make using the materials in your Making STEM Connection kit. You received 30 of these DC batteries. You have battery holders, and you have batteries, rechargeable AA batteries that you can use with them to make an art bot. Another art activity to turn your STEM into STEAM involves the Makey Makey. And the other picture that you see here is one of our resident makers, Bridget, and she is painting with watercolors, but she's also interacting with the Makey Makey. So what you see is on this piece of watercolor paper are the alligator clips that are hooked up to the paper. And then there is a paintbrush, and the paintbrush also has an alligator connecting wire hooked up to it and some aluminum foil, and all of those are connected to the Makey Makey. And as you know from the training, and if you've used Makey Makeys before, you can create, in this case, a sound, which is what they had set up, by completing the circuit using the Makey Makey. So they used a computer, they programmed different sounds associated with the different buttons on the Makey Makey, and when Bridget would paint with water, the water would conduct the electricity between the alligator clip and the paintbrush, and it would then cause the sound that was programmed in the computer associated with that button. So she was painting with music, painting on an actual watercolor paper, but also creating music at the same time. And then it was really interesting if you created a line, as she's doing here in the picture, between these two corners. So there's water connecting the yellow clip to the green clip. So you're completing the circuit that way, and both of those sounds would be occurring at the same time. So this is a really amazing way to include the art, the A in STEAM, into your STEM experiences and thinking about watercolors in a very different way. Again, this is being innovative and creative and thinking differently about these maker opportunities. That, again, is our theme for today. We're going to look at what are those challenges, what are those outcomes for making, and innovation is one of those top things that we're aiming for students to do, but it's also a challenge of how do you help people to think innovatively? How do you create an innovator? And maybe students aren't the only ones that we're trying to inspire to be an innovator. So that's what we're going to look at today in our webinar, are the challenges and outcomes of maker education. So I want you to think for a moment, and you could write this down or just think about it in your mind, but I would like you to list 3 challenges that you are facing when you're utilizing the maker mentality in your learning environment. This could be based on materials. It could be based on your own skills or knowledge. It could be based on your environment or the setting, the students that you're working with, the amount of time that you have to work with them. So I'd like you to write down 3 of these. And if you feel comfortable, I would ask you to type 1 or more of these into the chat room. And then we can have some discussion about what are some of those things that are challenging. Maybe you might find others that are having those same challenges as well. And then maybe too, as a group, we can look at what are some of those solutions? How do we address that? What are ways that we can look at these challenges in maker education? Because to be honest, this is a very different way of working with youth. This isn't handing them a worksheet. This isn't giving them a book to read on their own. This is involving tools and equipment, mess, loud noises, unconventional spaces. It involves all of those things. So how do we address those challenges? So please share some of your challenges in the chat room, and then let's have a discussion. We can have almost a side discussion going on in the chat room of different ways that people have addressed this or questions that they have, and we as a collective can maybe look at those. I want to inspire you to move past these challenges, to solve these issues or problems that you think might be hindering your opportunity to have students create this magical experience in the makerspace. So I'm going to share some ideas with you, and I really enjoy this quote by Seymour Papert. If you're interested in more about Seymour Papert, you can find that in the Invent to Learn book, the blue book that came with your kit. But I love this statement that he says about someday Monday. If you have a vision of someday, you can use this to guide what you do Monday. But if your vision of where it is going is doing the same old stuff a bit or a lot better, your efforts will be bypassed by history. So what Papert is trying to say is that we need to see that long-term goal. What is it that someday you're hoping to have? Is it a set of equipment in your room? Is it students being actively involved with? Students having comfortability and using these things? Students sharing their ideas with? What is your someday? You need to have that vision, and that vision will help you to tackle those challenges and look at those outcomes involved in this type of teaching. But if you're just thinking that I'm just going to do what I've always been doing, just do it a little bit better. So I'm going to add this to what I'm already doing, and that will be my improvement. You're missing on those opportunities of growth that could be beyond that. So think about your someday and use your someday to guide what you do on Monday. What do you do now? Another quote that we have by Grace Hopper, and this is one of the books that came in the K3 kit, is the story of Grace Hopper, the computer programmer. But this is a really great thing for us to remember. She says that a ship in port is safe, but that is not what ships are built for. Sail out to the sea and do new things. Try new things. You have an amazing set of materials in your Making STEM Connection Kit. And some of those things, you may not even have any idea right now what that could be used for. Or you can't imagine how your students could find a use or purpose for that piece of equipment or that tool. But keep exploring, keep trying. Challenge your students to keep exploring and trying. And maybe some of those equipment pieces might be useful in that journey that they're taking, or that challenge that they're accepting, or that new mentality that they're trying to embrace and think about of how do I create something out of the thoughts and ideas that are in my head. So be like Grace. Sail out to the sea, do new things, try new things, and it's okay if it doesn't always work. It's okay if it didn't turn out the way that you thought. We want to model that for our students. We want to give them the opportunity to see us being creative and us being innovative in the process. So explore, try, innovate. Another book that I highly recommend, this was not in your kit, but I really recommend this as a resource for you, is The Innovators Mindset by George Kiros. And it's actually a really great book to do as a book club, because at the end of each chapter, George offers a selection of questions, of prompts, of thought prompts, so that you could, as a group, have some discussion based on the information from that chapter. And George really challenges you to think differently about the way you teach and the purposes for why you teach, and how do you inspire that type of innovation in other professionals that you work with. It's really great in your motivation and your understanding of how to be innovative with your students, but also how to be innovative with the other people that you work with. Whether these be supervisors or whether these be coworkers, but how do we inspire that innovative mindset in all of the people that we work with? And he says that we rarely create something different until we experience something different. So if we're asking our students to be creative and be innovative, they need to see that. They need to see examples of what does that look like. And maybe that begins with you having something creative, trying something innovative or new in the process. So we keep using this word innovation, and this has been something at the Science Center that we've been focusing a lot of time on, is thinking about what is the definition of innovation? What does that mean? I feel like it's a catchphrase that we hear a lot of people use. So I asked a variety of people, what do you think innovation means? And some of the responses that you see here come from children, from older students, from adults, from educators. And this is a collection of some of the thoughts that they have about innovation and what does innovation mean. And I'll give you a few minutes to kind of read through these, but as you look at them, we see some similarities in these statements, some words that are repeated throughout all of these thoughts and ideas about what innovation is. For example, do you notice the word creative? We see that word in here, or creating something, or making something, that many people feel like being creative, creating and making is an important part of innovation. Another word that we see in here a lot is the word new. Something new, something newer, something we haven't seen before. One of the answers here talks about something being spontaneous at a moment when you need something right now, something new, versus a solution that is necessary. I have to have it right now. But this idea of something new, something we haven't thought of before, is a theme. Another theme that we see in these definitions of innovation is this idea of it being a process. That it's not just a word, but it's an action. And a process takes time. A process has steps. A process has many facets to it. And so we're on a journey of innovation to create something new through a process. That's how we need to look at these opportunities for our students, is how do we allow them to have that? How do we model that for them? How do we show them what creativity looks like, our own version of creativity? How do we show them new ways that we're trying to do something and the process that we're using to do that? And that process includes planning. Maybe it includes failure. Maybe it includes re-innovation of a previous thought. This is something I tried before. I'm coming up with a new way. This is the new outcome from that. Model that for them. Let them see you being an innovator, and that will inspire their innovation as well. George Kiros created this graphic, and I think it's very powerful in looking at these characteristics of being innovative, of the innovator's mindset. What does it look like? And my favorite is his number one, which is being empathetic, having the teacher be in the student's shoes. Allow yourself to be in the position where the student is, learning something new, not having an idea of how it's going to turn out, being in an uncomfortable situation of not knowing or having to work with somebody else when you haven't met them before. Those kind of things. Allow yourself to have those experiences so that you can help students as they go through a similar process. Number two on his list here are problem finders. Not just problem solvers, but problem finders. So starting with a question and then finishing with an answer. How do we do that? Thinking with that type of mentality of what is it I'm trying to do, where am I trying to go, and how exactly do I get there? Being a risk taker, right? Sail out beyond the harbor. Take that path that not all the others are taking. What is that innovative path, that new way to try it? What does it look like in your classroom? Maybe your classroom needs a complete total makeover and you're going to go in a completely different direction than how you've done it in the past. That's being an innovator. That's the innovative mindset that your students can benefit from. Number 4 talks about being networked. You don't have to do this alone. Find others. Find others that are on a similar path, or find others that can be a resource for you. And those could be other students in the class. It could be other educators. It could be people in your community. And create that network that will help to support innovation. Number 5, being observant. Noticing other ways that people have been innovative themselves or overcome their challenges or found new ways to be creative or new processes. Number 6 looks at being a creator, adding idea to action. So not just thinking about it, but how then do I bring it to fruition? How do I make that come alive? How do I create that? How do I take that idea and actually do something with it? Being resilient. Persistence is one of the strongest skills that we can give our students. If it doesn't work the first time, how do you move beyond that? How do you learn from that? How do you use the other people in your network to support you? How do you use that as an important step in the outcome that you're looking from? So resilience is a very important part of this innovative mindset. We can't just give up the first time it doesn't work, or when I don't get the results that I thought or the outcomes that I was expecting. So we want students to have that resilience, but we as educators need to have that as well. And always being reflective and thinking about it. How did it go? Where, what was my process? Where were my strong points? Where could I continue to work on things? What could I have added? How can I use that in the future? The reflective process. Tap into your natural creativity. And here are some characteristics that you can get from the innovator's mindset. It's kind of those same things that we were just talking about in George's book. But these characteristics, you need to be visionary. You need to be able to look into the future. What is it you want? What is that big idea that you're looking for? We talked about being empathetic and understanding what this process is like. Put yourself in that process so that you have a similar experience. Models of learning. What are those different models that we can use? What are those different ways that students can learn, as well as yourself as being a learner? Be an open risk taker. Let students know we're trying something new. Let's see how it goes. Help me with this process. Let me know ways that it's working, when it's not working. Being networked, being observant. A team builder. How do we use that network to help us to move forward? And always be focused on relationships. So those relationships are important because they help us to see why this is important. What is the application of this? What is the use of this innovative idea? If you go back and look at what many of the people suggested as a definition of innovative, there was a purpose to it, a reason why we need this. It helps us to. It allows people to do something more or better than they did before. So focus on that relationship of how we share that with others. And oftentimes people think about, well, I'm not really creative like that. You know, I'm not able to do that. Go back and remember the training. Remember when we went through the different creative types, the 7 different creative types. Everybody found themselves as at least one of these creative types, right? So maybe you're the artist creative type and you don't believe in structure and you don't believe in rigidity and you think about the organic process of allowing students to create and learn and think. Maybe you're the geek type and you find structure, you find creativity within the structure. You're creative inside of the box. Maybe you're the engineer creative type and you look at improvement and you say, what is this component of this activity or this lesson or this opportunity and how can I make it better? What are the iterations of that I can do to improve it? Maybe you're an astronaut. Maybe you're a collector of ideas and you bring those ideas back and think about how they can be adapted into your learning environment. Maybe you're a point guard. Maybe you're somebody who can look out and say, okay, here are all my plans. Here's the different ways that I hope to get to this outcome. And any of these are good ways to get me to that point. So I have a plan A, a plan B, C, D, and F, and I can use any of those. But I'm going to look at my options, see what's going to work best, and then go in that direction. Maybe you're the architect type. Maybe you're creative because you bring the right people together and you help those people function as a team. And you can recognize that the strengths of one person help to support the strengths of another. And you bring them together as an innovative and creative team. Maybe that's your creative type. Or maybe you're a hacker. Maybe you're the person who says that the status quo just isn't going to work for me. And I'm going to be creative in a completely different way. I'm going to look at this in a totally different situation. And that may be going against the grain. And that might ruffle some feathers or disrupt some thinking. But that, in the end, will provide a great outcome for the students that I work with. Don't forget about your creative type. Use that. Look for others that have similar or opposing creative types to you and partner with them and use them in your innovative process to support you. Here are some ideas and suggestions for creating an environment that fosters a culture of innovation. For example, focusing on strength-based leadership. So what do we find in our strengths? How do we support those and say, you know, we're really good at this. We have great resources for this. We have a lot of people that are comfortable with this. Let's use that in this process. Allowing learners the learner's needs to drive our decisions. Not always just looking at, well, what's the next chapter in the book? But what is it my students are interested in? What do they need right now in order to accomplish this learning goal that we have set? So what are those needs and how do I allow those needs to drive the innovation and the creativity in our classroom, providing those types of learning opportunities? Narrowing our focus and engaging in deep learning. Instead of going through and just touching on lots of topics so we can say we covered it, we can learn it for the test and forget it later. Why not narrow your focus and go into a deeper learning where they can have lots of multiple experiences with that concept, that idea, that construct for their own kind of learning? So think about that. How can we narrow it and kind of eliminate some of the other distractions that will really encourage their mind to be more innovative? Embracing an open culture. Be open to what your students have to say. Don't quickly judge and say, well, that's going to be too much, or we can't do that. That'll take too much time. We want them to create an environment of open thinking and support. So embrace that. And for the administrators in the group or the administrators you work with, create learning experiences for the educators that we would love to see in the classroom. Let's model that. So the pictures you see here, these are some workshops that we did with teachers in Johnston, Iowa. And we wanted them to be in the shoes of students and have a chance to be innovative themselves and work together as a team to solve a problem. So here's the problem that we gave them. We provided them what we call the Pom Pom Launcher Challenge. And in this challenge, we gave each team a paper bag, and inside of that paper bag were the following contents. There were some straws, some straw bees, note cards, rubber bands, binder clips, pipe cleaners, paper clips, and popsicle sticks. Every bag had the same amount of every one of those items. And then we gave those bags to the group, and we told the group that their goal was to launch the pom-pom the furthest. That was all the goal was. And we gave them a couple other stipulations in the process. We asked them to assign everybody in the group a job. So one job might be the materials manager. So the materials manager was in charge of managing the materials that was in the bag. There was a timer. The timer was necessary because they had 2 minutes to begin with a drawing. They had 2 minutes to just draw. They couldn't open the bag, or they could open the bag, but they couldn't use any of the materials to begin building with. They had to start with a design and a drawing. And then they had 10 minutes to actually create something based on the drawing. So the timer was in charge of keeping track of that time so that they didn't get behind and knew when the end was coming. The architect in the group was the one who was in charge of drawing. So the drawing that was done in the first 2 minutes, that drawing was created by the architect. Now the architect still had to communicate with the other people in the group, but their job was to draw out the plan for what they were going to do. And then there was a questioner. And the questioner was the only person who could come up to me and ask me a question. They were the only ones that were allowed to do that. So everybody in the group had a job. And here's what was fascinating. I stood at one part of the room and I had a table full of other materials, but I didn't say anything about those materials. I didn't tell them about those materials. I didn't describe them. I didn't suggest them. I just stood there in front of these materials. And then once we began, and I told them, okay, your 2 minutes starts now, and then you have to keep track of it, right? They all went to work on designing and building and creating. And then when the 2 minutes was up, I said, okay, I need to see your plan. So I was the city engineer, and they had to come to me and show me their plan before they could get started on building. So another staff person could certainly be that city engineer that would approve their plan, but their plan had to be approved first just to make sure that they as a group had clarity on the plan. And then their 10 minutes of building began. And finally, I was waiting in front of all these materials for somebody to come up and ask me. And finally, one of the groups sent up their questioner and said, can we have some scissors? And I said, what a great question. I have scissors right here on the table. Yes, you can take these scissors and take them back to your table. Other groups saw this and said, wait a minute, you didn't tell us we could have scissors. And I said, I know I didn't. That's the question for you to ask. And then they got the idea that the materials that I had in front of me were available to them. They just had to ask. They had to, and then they would come up, a materials person would come up and say something, and I said, are you the materials person or the questioner? And they had to say that they were the questioner in order to talk to me. So the materials person would have to tell the questioner, go ask her if we can have this, this, or this. So then they did that. Then Finally, one of the groups also came up to me, a questioner, and said, "Can we tape the launcher to the table?" And I said, "What a great question. Yes, you can." And then when we got to the end and it was time to try this out, one of the groups said, "Well, how come they got to tape theirs to the table?" I'm like, "Because they asked." And I could have said no, but I decided to allow them to do that. This was helping the teachers to recognize the importance of asking questions. Nobody, not any one of the groups ever asked me how we were going to measure the pom-pom. How are we going to measure the distance that the pom-pom traveled, which may have had an effect on how they designed their launcher. Wouldn't that have been a great question for them to ask? And I could have provided clarity to them. When we were done with the challenge, we had a lot of discussion afterwards, and probably one of the biggest things that they reflected on was the importance of asking questions and having that thought process as a group and then thinking about what else do we need, what can we do, and asking. Too often, we just take it for as is. This is what we're given. But we need to help our students to recognize the importance of asking questions, getting clarity, using those questions to find out more information that can help in the innovative process, finding those that have more resources to support you in collaboration. So this was a really great, very simple, very quick activity that was done with teachers to help tie themselves into the innovative process and support them as they were looking for ways to support student innovation. A great resource for you to look at how do we create students that are innovators? How do we model that thinking? Is the book called Creating Innovators, The Making of Young People Who Will Change the World. And this is put out by Tony Wagner, and he really looks at that process, like we talked about in innovation, of how do you instill innovation? What does it look like, and how do you support that? And he says in his book, we have to become the country that produces more ideas to solve more problems. We have to become the country that leads the way in developing the new technologies for a sustainable planet and affordable health care. We have to become the country that creates the new and better products, processes, and services that other countries want and need. This is what our country depends on. This is why innovation is so important in our future. And this is why many CEOs from companies recognize the importance of innovation. And we're going to watch a short piece of a TED Talk by Tony Wagner talking about the importance of innovation. And there's more to this TED Talk, but we're just going to watch one piece of this.
So how many of you are educators, past, present, or future? Raise your hands. Good grief. I'm in the right place. I'm a recovering high school English teacher. True story. How many of you mentor young kids? Raise your hands. I'm definitely in the right place. For 25 years, we've heard about failing schools and the need to reform our schools. Anybody want to go reform school? Raise your hands. Einstein once said, the formulation of the problem is often more important than the solution. I would like to respectfully suggest that our schools are not failing. They certainly don't need reforming. The system is obsolete and needs reinventing, not reforming. What's changed? It's simply this. Knowledge today is a commodity. It's free. It's like air. It's like water. How many of you have been on the Khan Academy website? Raise your hands. Yeah, most of you. Right. You know the quality of the education people can receive on that if they're willing to take the initiative. How many of you had to memorize the periodic table in high school? Raise your hands. Ah, everybody. Good. So how many were there again? No, wait, I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. Whatever number you came up with is wrong because 2 more were added last week. And planets, are we up 1 or down 1? I don't know, I haven't checked my news feed today. And let's see, let's have a contest. Why don't you recite the 50 state capitals from memory while I Google them? Let's see who's quicker. Knowledge is a commodity. The world no longer cares whether or not you're smarter than a 5th grader or how well you do a Trivial Pursuit. What the world cares about is not what you know, but what you can do with what you know. And that is a completely different education problem. Then the question becomes, do you have the skill and do you have the will to use the knowledge you have acquired? Okay, so I got to tell you kind of an intellectual journey I've been on. 2005, I read The World is Flat by Friedman. How many have read that book? Scared the heck out of me because, as you know, he describes a world where increasingly any job that can be routine is rapidly being offshored or automated. White collar, blue collar, doesn't matter. Talked to him recently, interviewed him for the new book. He said, I got one thing wrong in that book. I said, what was that? He said, the pace of change. It's happening so much faster. So I worried about what kinds of skills will our young people need to get and keep a good job in this new global knowledge economy. And in fact, are they the same skills they'll need for citizenship and for continuous learning? Started interviewing a wide range of innovators, literally from Apple to Unilever, executives, US Army, community leaders, college teachers, asking all of them, what are the skills that matter most today? What's important? Came to understand there's a set of core competencies every young person must be well on the way to mastering before he or she finishes high school. Not just to get a good job, but to be a continuous learner and an active and informed citizen in the 21st century. Very briefly, they are, number one, critical thinking and problem solving. What do they mean by critical thinking? The ability to ask the right questions, ask really good questions. Number two, collaboration across networks and leading by influence. Number three, agility and adaptability. Number four, initiative and entrepreneurialism. Number five, effective oral and written communication. Number six, accessing and analyzing information. And lastly, number seven, curiosity and imagination. So a couple things happened when that book came out 3.5 years ago. This is the global achievement gap that Homa just referred to. First of all, I got a kind of affirmation from literally around the world that simply stunned me. Taiwan to Singapore to Helsinki to Madrid and kind of all places in between. Thailand, Bahrain, Birmingham, England. From Wall Street to West Point, people said to me, yep, these are exactly the right skills. I felt pretty good.
So Tony gave us these 7 core competencies that he learned through his research are what we need, what students need to be successful in the world. And I have them written here for you. So if you didn't get a chance to write them down while he was talking in his TED Talk, I have them listed for you here for us to think about. So he said critical thinking, the ability to ask the right questions, exactly what we just talked about in the Pom Pom Challenge. Sometimes just being able to ask a question itself is a skill that we need to practice. And what is a good question and how do we ask that? So critical thinking. Number 2, collaboration across networks and leading by influence. How do we work with other people? How do you seek out other people to work with? And how do you find that network that's going to support you? Agility and adaptability. It's so often that I hear people say, well, if only I had this, or if this hadn't gotten in my way. Well, it did get in your way, or you didn't have that. So how do you adapt? What are you going to do? There isn't a bottomless pit of money for everybody in order to make something that they want. So how do you adapt? What are those ways that you work around those barriers so that you still get to the outcome that you were looking for? Initiative and entrepreneurial thinking. That is so huge, that idea of being able to take that initiative step and think about how can I use this to serve others? How could this be something that will support others? And maybe that is a career or an income that I can use to support myself or my family. Effective written and oral communication. I hear this from professionals in many, many STEM fields, the importance of communication. How do we do that? How do we share our thoughts? How do we ask questions? How do we listen to other people? How do we convince them of the track that we want to go on? Or how do we adapt to their thoughts and ideas? How do we do that and communicate successfully with others? Assessing and analyzing information. Just as Tony said, it's not about what you know, it's about what you do with what you know. It's not enough just to be able to cite things or to to memorize something and recite it back. But you have to know, what can I do with this? What is the purpose of this? How can I use this in the process that I'm going through? And most importantly, curiosity and imagination. And unfortunately, I feel like oftentimes we take that away from our students because we say, this is what you're going to do. And I want it to look like this. I need it to look like this because that helps me to assess it, or that helps me to know that you finished it. We need to give students that opportunity to be creative, to be curious, to imagine different things. As adults, we should have this as well. And oftentimes we say, well, that's for the younger students. No, high school students should also be focusing on their imagination. What are those crazy wackadoodle ideas that they have? What are those imaginative things that they dream about that could become a possibility someday? If we don't have those thoughts now, we're never going to progress off of them. So we want to instill that in our students. We want to make that, we want to be champions of that. We want to put that in the forefront of important things that our students are able to do in our learning space. So those are those 7 core competencies that Tony has put out for us. There are other TED Talks that he has, actually the continuation of that same TED Talk, which are really fascinating about application of we as educators. How do we use these and how do we set up that kind of mindset? So if you enjoyed that piece that we shared with you about Tony, I highly recommend, first of all, you read his book, but also you look for the continuation of those TED Talks. A survey related to innovation was conducted in 2011 by GE, and they interviewed 1,000 senior business executives in 12 different countries. And they found that from the results of that 95% of the respondents believe that innovation is the main lever for a more competitive national economy, and 88% of them believe innovation is the best way to create jobs in their country. This goes along with what we talked about in the PD that you attended earlier about the importance of creativity and innovation. This is what businesses need. This is what CEOs, this is what business leaders are looking for. They need people who can think, how do I solve this problem? Even if it's a really small problem. They don't want that person necessarily coming to them and saying, I don't know what to do, I don't know how to move forward. They want that person to be able to solve the problem on their own, or to be able to think creatively and say, hey, here's an entirely new solution so that that problem doesn't even come up in the future. That's what we need. That's what they're looking for. And we need to supply those experiences to our students now so that they have that in the future for the employers that are looking for them. U.S. World News did a list, and I think this is really fascinating as well because they're talking about 2020, which is really only in a year. These are the top fields that are likely to flourish in that time around 2020. And it's fascinating to look at how many of these are STEM fields, but how many of these really require that ability to think and be innovative. And I love the fact that number 10 is entrepreneurship. Being an entrepreneur, thinking about a new way to, a business solution that, a way to begin a new process for, that entrepreneurial thinking is listed as a field that is going to flourish. And they follow that with an explanation that says, it is often overlooked, but the need for innovators running their own businesses could be more important than ever in 2020. Forecasters expect strong growth in traditional businesses such as used car dealers, hair and nail salons, pet grooming, and office services, which means anybody able to come up with better, cheaper ways to serve customers will reap a windfall. Technology startups will no doubt keep changing the way consumers work and live, and nobody really knows what the next iPad, Twitter, or Pinterest will be, except perhaps some entrepreneur who's dreaming about it right now. He or she may have a bigger impact on life in 2020 than anything the forecasters see coming. Being a maker, being an innovator, having that thought process of saying, here's a way that we can. Here's an idea that I have. I've talked with these people and together we would like to create. Those are the things that are going to change the world, and we need to foster that. We need to grow that and provide those opportunities for the students that we work with. That's what making allows you to do. Step away from the structured lesson all the time. Doesn't mean it can't have value, but students need to have an opportunity to really grow that thinking and that innovative process. They need to see it modeled by you so that they can use that when they become adults later on. So I want to try an activity with you. I have a little bit of a challenge. I would like you to look at the picture here on the screen and just think about, what do you see? What do you see in this picture? You probably all have very different ideas of what you see. None of those ideas are wrong because each of those ideas is based on a previous experience that you've had. But now that we've all seen this same picture, let's just think about, what are some words that you could use to describe this picture? We're now creating a common experience here. So what are some ways that you could describe this picture? And then think about, maybe from some of those words, maybe from some of those descriptive words, what would you title this picture? Be innovative and creative. There is no one answer. There is no right answer to this exercise. And we can collectively come up with some ideas, but maybe your choice for a title is very different than somebody else's. It's not wrong. That's your version of it. That's your creative way of looking at this same object. And how powerful is that when we create a group of people that can see the same thing from many different angles and see many different purposes or applications or uses or titles for that same object. Do your students have to know what it is to learn something about it? Do I need to tell you what it is, or can you still learn something just from this experience? You don't even have to know what it is to let your students have a learning opportunity from this image. We need to release ourselves as educators and mentors and coaches and parents from feeling like we have to have all the answers. We have to know what it's going to be or what the outcome is. We don't have to be experts in technology. You don't have to be the know-all of everything that is happening in your learning environment. You just have to know how to teach that to somebody else. You have more to teach than just what you know. You can teach skills. You can teach application. You can teach thinking. You can teach collaboration. And none of those things are based on exactly what you know or what this object is. So don't let you feeling like I don't know enough about, or I don't understand this, or I'm not very comfortable with, don't let that be a barrier for learning with your students. Open that up to them. Let them have that experience, and you can guide them through the process. Let's transition from the mindset of I have the answer to how can I help you find the answer? And that answer can vary from student to student. I have another question for you. What is this? Have you seen this before? Do you know what this is? Do you know what it does? This is Voyager 1. Does that help? Do you know anything about the Voyager project? What it's for? And its mission? Voyager 1 was launched in September of 1977. The mission was to fly by Jupiter and Saturn and then continue on out past the solar system. The mission was altered to allow a rare occurrence, a flyby of Neptune and Uranus, and it is still the only spacecraft to have visited these other outer planets. It has continued on past the Kuiper Belt, and it has entered interstellar space. It is the first human-made object to do this. It still has functioning sensors on it that are sending back new information every day to us. It was built in the late 60s and early 70s, and we are still learning from it today. We're still gathering information. We're still looking at the data. And here is the chief scientist on the Voyager project had this to say. We all knew we were on a mission of discovery. We just had no idea how much discovery there would be. We just keep finding things we didn't know were there to be found. I love that last statement. We just keep finding things we didn't know were there to be found. That's what this is about. It's not about finishing a curriculum or just meeting the requirements of what our district says or just what is it we want to have at the end of that time together. But what are you still discovering? What are we still finding out? What things are out there that you didn't even know we still needed to know and learn? That's called curiosity. That taps into our imagination. And the picture that you see here in this image is Earth from Voyager. So look at where we are, how far away out in space Voyager has gone and is still sending information to us. We're still learning from this project, even though it started a long time ago. And this should inspire our curiosity, our wonder, our longing, our innovation to think differently. What do we know now that is different than what we knew yesterday? What are we finding to know that we didn't know was there to learn to begin with? We want to continue to maintain that thought process. And as you continue on being an innovator, being a creator, here are some more resources to help you with that. The Youth Makerspace Playbook that we continue to talk about, this is a free downloadable document. It's a PDF that you can print out, and you can find the address here on the screen, but you can also go to Maker Ed and find it there. And in this document, on pages 41 through 51, you will find some information about approaches and practices to making and being innovative and creative. And I think that's a really important point they brought up here is about language. Language is perhaps the most important and powerful tool used within any makerspace. Words have the power to invite, inspire, and potentiate, but also to shut down and exclude. So how are we encouraging our students to think? What are the words we're using to inspire them and encourage them and really foster that environment of creativity? We don't want to shut them down. We don't want to say things like, we can't do that, there's no time, or that might be too messy. But how do we use those words to turn that thought into something that can be done? It doesn't mean we have to say yes to everything they ask, but how do we use those words to create an environment of support that encourages them to continue to have curiosity and wonder? Sustainability in your makerspace. They address that in pages 52 through 64. And I think this is a really fabulous idea. They talk about Brightworks School in San Francisco, and they host a Maker in Residence program similar to what we do in the summer. We hire Maker in Residence for our makerspace. And they went on to talk about, to further break down the walls that often separate school from the world, we invite artists, engineers, makers, writers, and craftspeople from all over the Bay Area to come into the school and use it like their own studio for a week. Students can watch the maker at work, and sometimes they're given the opportunity to collaborate or apprentice with the maker as well. What an amazing experience. Could you invite somebody from your community to come in to do what their work is in front of the students, to let the students observe and see and interact with them, maybe even participate in some of the work that they are doing? Is that something that you could provide for them. And I bet you have lots of resources that you haven't even thought about or tapped into. These could be people associated with your school, parents, community members. It could be people within your organization that have a special skill set in things like knitting or sewing or technology. But look for those resources and allow students to see somebody who's an adult using those same skills that you're trying to encourage with them. Another resource in the Invent to Learn book is making the case for making education. And I think these are some great statements here. You should not make the case for making, tinkering, or engineering based on achievement or higher test scores. You may be tempted, since some people equate learning with standardized testing. Seeing engaged and excited students using nearly magical tools and technology will ultimately be the convincing factor for many people. Invite your parents to come in. Invite your community members, your school board, your principal, others that you work with. Invite them in to see the amazing work that these students are able to do. And that will support the case. That will make the case for this kind of experience. Don't just hinge this all on student achievement in terms of standardized tests or assignments or things like that. They need to see the creative process in action. And I'm telling you, it is inspirational when people see that, and they will be amazed at what these kids can do. I've had amazing opportunities to go and visit many of your classrooms, and every time I walk into them, I'm amazed at all of the different things that people do. What are they called to do? What are their own personal strengths that they bring to the classroom? And what are the students inspired by? What are those things that spark an idea and the rest of the class or that group of students feeds off of it, and they get excited and they're innovative and they want to try something similar to that? That's how you make the case for this. That's how you help people to understand the importance of these type of experiences and this type of education. The book, The Art of Tinkering, also has some great ideas for you in terms of helping people to understand what this looks like. They say, be comfortable not knowing. That's a very scary statement. Be comfortable not knowing. Seek real-world examples everywhere. Everywhere you go, how is somebody using this skill in the real world? How are they applying this and looking for this? And revisit and iterate on your ideas. That is so important. How can I improve on something that I tried before? How could I add something, take something away? How could I make it better? And recognize that this is just a step in my creative process. This isn't the end goal, but this is one step in my innovation and thinking. And iteration is a way to continually improve on that. In your book, when you open it up, you see this on pages 14 and 15, are the tinkering tenets. And these are some great pieces of advice that you can use to kind of inspire yourself and help others to understand what the maker movement is about. And they give some examples of things that you can use or different ways that you could use those. But I come back to these tinkering tenets often to remind myself of ways to inspire me as well as the other people that I work with. And also for motivation ideas, I encourage you to use our Facebook page. Again, this is a closed page. It is just people that are in the Making STEM Connections program. But imagine, this is 3 years now, and there are people from all of those years and these experiences that are contributing to that page, to that Facebook page. So go to that for resources. You can look at things that people are trying, new ideas. Sometimes people post questions, but it's amazing to see all of the different things that people put on there. So use that as a resource as well. I love this quote about change because this can be very scary. Having a toolbox with dangerous tools and a sewing machine and felting materials and circuitry and things that are not typically found in the learning environment that you work in can be very scary. And change is a part of that because we want to have our students have these opportunities, which means we have to change. So if you dislike change, you're going to dislike irrelevance even more. So we have to change. It has to be done different. We have to move with our needs and change along with how our world is changing. And the jobs that students are going to be asked to do in the future don't even exist now. So how do you prepare them for that? You prepare them by being innovative and how to be a thinker and how to collaborate and all of those things that Tony was talking about. That's what we have to do. So we need to change the way that we are interacting with our students, and the way that we're doing it this year may have to be different next year because things may change again. It's not a static way of interacting, but looking at what are those needs and how do I address the needs of those students. So on that thought of change, I have a little video here for you to watch about the scariness of change, but also the obviousness of the solution.
Whoa, that's not good.
Oh, I don't need this. I'm already late.
Somebody will come. Anybody out there?
Do you have a phone?
No. Sorry. Somebody! Hello? There are 2 people stuck on an escalator and we need help. Now, would somebody please do something?
Help!
I don't believe this. You gotta be kidding me.
I'm gonna cry.
Well, there's not enough left to do, is there?
Hello? Hey, don't worry about it. I'll fix it in a second.
He said he can fix it. All right. All right. That's more like it. He says he can fix it.
Walking down the sidewalk, kicking my feet as I'm moving to the music. Step to the beat. I woke up today, canceled all my plans, and I stepped right outside with my guitar in my hands, and the notes became alive as the sound caressed the air, and I kicked it up a notch as I strolled without a care, 'cause I'm going down the road to a brand new place, and I'll get there with a smile.
Just get off the escalator. Isn't it crazy how sometimes the answer, the solution to our problem could be that obvious and we just don't see it? So if you're looking at some of these challenges of maker education, what does it look like? How do I fund it? How do I keep it going? How do I get people to support it? How do I get more people involved? How do I perpetuate it? How do I get more space? Look for those answers. Keep striving to find those answers. And maybe they're right there. We just have to look at it in a different way. Be innovative and creative in that process as well. Model that for your students and show them how you're going through the process of being innovative and creative and thinking and solving the problems that you are facing and thinking about, because that is the key to their success in the future. So thank you for joining us again today for this webinar on making STEM connections. As always, if you have any questions or concerns about the program or the materials, please email me and I will do my best to get back to you. I love to hear stories of things that you're trying, examples or ways that you're using the materials so that I can share those with others. So please continue to share those on the Facebook page, but you can also email them to me. You can put them on our Twitter page as well, and then I will continue to share those out with others. So thank you very much. Happy making, and I look forward to talking to you another time.